Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to finish up today with a special selection, which is where one of you tell me exactly what it is I need to check out. If you have your own song you'd like to submit for special selection, you can find a link to do so in the description below. Today's special selection comes at us from Jamel, says, "Hello, Bryan. Could you please do a reaction to Lucifer by Sordal? It's from the solo project of Stein Roger Sordal, a Norwegian multi-instrumentalist who is mostly known as a bass player for the legendary progressive metal band Green Carnation. I think he deserves a lot more recognition as he's a really talented guy. I'm quite curious about your opinion on his music. Thanks in advance." So that's what we're going to be checking out. We have Sordal, the track Lucifer. Let's get into this and see what's going on.
Honestly, it's like I'm waiting out my shadow. Seemingly
Really great use of the sound sphere.
waiting for a sign. When I sleep,
Okay, I got the meter now.
my dreams loop in a sequence. Drifting like I'm the last one of my kind.
Really strong bass presence. Makes sense if he's a bass player.
Have the decency to leave.
Beautiful harmony, and once again, fantastic production on the width of everything.
If I don't see you, it's because I lost my way. Transcending grief without losing yourself in the process. In the end,
Very warm, those
you pulled
those
away
runs
alone.
in the synths on the left side.
If you don't love me, have the decency to leave.
It's so warm and inviting, and it's just a very calming song.
Oh, I understand, but I am not at ease with changes. Put your hand on my chest. This is life unconfessed. The one
Really nice soft resolution there.
what you prefer. Your morning star, your Lucifer. Nothing more than a glimpse of time, but it was filled with something real. A sweetheart of a deal, my love. My part is over, you just let go. Here we are, don't you be
The production on this is
afraid.
just so good.
I am not your enemy. I surrender entirely, my love. My part is
we have the intensity growing in the background, and his
You have
melodic
one shot
lines are
for
getting
the
a lot
kill,
bouncier and
one wish
more
to
fun, I
fulfill,
suppose.
my love. My part is over, you just let go. Nothing more than a glimpse of time, but it was filled with something real. A sweetheart of a deal, my love.
This is
My
very
part
wide
is
with the
over,
extra
you
vocals
just
right
let
here.
go. Here we are, don't you be afraid, 'cause I am not your enemy. I surrender entirely, my love. My part is over, you just let go. In your own words, half is not enough. You have one shot for the kill, one wish to fulfill, my love. My part is over, you just let go.
We still got the piano going on over here. Well, actually, the piano over there is picking up that 3-3-2 rhythm we just had. Really great melodic flow on this guitar line. Yeah, beautiful duet right there. Ooh, interesting. Hmm. I don't know what to make of that ending. Yeah, everything in here though is gorgeous, expertly crafted. I loved every bit of it. The song mostly existed in two sections. We had our intro part, and then we transitioned that into the ending, which kind of had a little bit of variation in it, but I think for the most part we can classify it as a single section. Although, yeah, yeah, there's a lot of variation to it. So I guess I would label this as like A section, and then B section, and then like B2 and then B3 and B4, just because they're all so closely related to each other that I'm not sure it really makes sense to separate all of the B when they're all unique sections, but they all kind of build off of what the other one's doing. So in this A section, uh, it primarily is, especially when we look at how the B section ends up being, rather sparse and withheld, especially the way it starts. Both sections are slow burns. We are looking at building layers upon layers to create an ending atmosphere for everything to sort of reside within and fill the emotional aspect of the song. The first one we start off with a lot of sparse elements, so much so that I couldn't even realize it was in 4/4 until some more solidified rhythmic components came into the picture. Um, but we had a strong bass tone present throughout a lot of this. It was really sparse, maybe 2 notes per bar, give or take. We also had a lot of spatial use. We had a synthesizer sound that was starting from the left side and panning over to the right. I think playing eighth notes, just kind of a run. Something along those lines, and panning while it's playing. Just really beautiful use of the panning element to create sort of this very relaxing, calming element. We also had another synthesizer that came in a little later that was sort of in a paring down of this idea, if you will. It was like 5 or 6 of those notes coming down and then just kind of ended and waited until the next bar and started at the top and came back down. And that was like center left pan, give or take, a little bit higher up in the mix. Speaking about that, we're going to get into it later, but the production on this is just phenomenal. It really is. The whole song just blew my mind. We also have vocals come in, drums come in, 2 guitars, I think. There's a lot of elements once we start looking at all the layers and how they get stacked, and I'm probably going to miss quite a few of them just because there's so much. But the thing I really want to point out is that everything comes together to create something very positive and uplifting, and in some cases, especially the chorus, I believe, very warming. There's one chord that it kicks off the chorus, and it feels like just rolling up in a blanket and just feeling that comfort of the warmth, right? And that's what the opening of the chorus felt for me both times we got to it. Um, and it, like I said, all of this mixed with the vocals and the melody that he's putting on top of all this, it's all just very comforting, very welcoming, very positive, very uplifting. I don't know what the lyrics are, and unfortunately, I won't know what the lyrics are. I looked for them to open up the tab so I could do a lyrical breakdown like we do at the end of every video, and there is none. I checked several lyric sites. I even looked on YouTube to see if I could find a non-topic because the topic videos have comments disabled. I looked for a non-topic video, maybe even just a fan upload of this song, so somebody in the comments might have lyrics, and I found nothing. Uh, just a little disheartened there. So we're not going to be able to do a lyrical dive into this, which I'm really looking forward to because it's such a warm song. But there's also some lines in here, the few that I picked up, that showcased maybe a tinge of sadness or sorrow. Definitely some sort of wrongdoing or tension that would create, well, some elements that would create the tension in a story, right? You got to have the friction, the conflict in order for a story to be interesting. So, yeah, but I never really picked up on any of that musically. The whole song is just beautiful from start to finish. And a lot of it is the way that these instruments play off of each other. There are very few instruments that are constantly going from start to finish, the beginning of a phrase to the end of a phrase, constantly moving, that would overlap with what another one is doing. A lot of the layers that are going on here, they remind me of the way that layers are used in a lot of modern pop and electronic music, where it's sort of, this is the sound I want for these 2 beats of the bar, right? And instead of having these long, drawn out melodic ideas or some sort of chord structure on the bottom that's just constantly playing, whole note chords, 1 chord per bar and just holding it out for the entire bar. A lot of these ideas are more segmented. Even looking at the lyrics or in the vocals, where I believe they took up the most amount of space or most amount of time being played, so to speak, They did so in pockets, in bursts. We would have, 3 beats of singing and then a couple beats of silence or something like that. And it allowed the melody itself to sort of have these moments to breathe where the words were allowed to be said and the weight of the words were allowed to be felt before we moved on. It wasn't about getting to the end as quickly as possible. It was making sure that everything played, everything said, every emotional element portrayed in the music is felt and understood before the song moves on. And through that, in this first section, I think they craft a very intricate but direct atmosphere through everything, through the layering, through the melodic component, through the chord progressions, through the phrasing. Everything is crafted in a way to create this, like I said, very wholesome, warm, uplifting atmosphere and allow it to really sink into the listener before we move on. Um, Before we get into the second half of this track, though, that I'm really excited to get into because it has a lot of rhythmic variation in it that we didn't really see in this opening. I gotta talk about this production, though, especially even just pertaining to this opening section. Especially if we go back to the beginning, because that's when we didn't have so many layers and we could really listen into how and where everything is placed. I mentioned that we have that opening synth line. I think it was a synth that just kind of pans around left to right behind the listener. And then we also have another synth part that is center left. It's the hair bit. But I also said that it was a little higher up than everything. And I don't mean that volume wise. And that's usually how I use that term. When I say the vocals are above the band, I'm talking volume wise. But here I'm talking about placement. It felt weird, but it really did feel like it started high, and as the notes descended, the sound also descended. And it's possible that I just kind of imagined that, but at the same time, we've heard descending lines before, and I never really get that vibe there. So I'm gonna guess that there is a little bit of a production trick going on. And once that started to happen, I really started to clue myself into everything else. When the guitars came in this first section, I noticed that they were panned left and right, pretty standard panning for guitar work, especially if you're going to have two of them, but they weren't close to me, especially if you are listening or if you're coming off of this from earlier reaction of I Hate God. I was talking about how that production style is very compressed, right? There's something about it that it's not so much about using the full sound sphere, it's about making sure that the sound is in your face and aggressive, which tied into how I felt the overall sound was aiming for. But here, everything feels very spacious. The two guitars are certainly panned to my left and right, but they don't feel like they're here at my ears. They feel like they're a little distant. And that panning synth sound feels like it comes from further away than the guitar and goes further out to the other side before coming back. And this is what I mean when I say that songs make great use of the sound sphere. There is spatiality around the listener, behind them, in front of them, above and below, to the left and to the right. And if we connect it all, we can create a sphere, or at least that's how I perceive it. I suppose you could also make a box out of it, but I like the rounding off of corners. So I kind of imagine it as a sphere. And when I listen to music, I kind of understand the different instruments as being placed in different areas. It might just be a little bit to the front and to the right, or to the left, or to the sides, or a little higher, a little lower, behind me, in front of me. And this song makes fantastic use of instrument placement. It's not just if it's to the left of me or in front of me. It's how far left, how far in front, and also making use of the y-axis, having things higher or lower, which to me is still something I can't quite wrap my head around as, I'm a production novice. I've just started learning production late last year, early this year. anyways, somewhere around that time. Uh, yeah, I guess it was last year then. Um, and I've been learning how to produce music outside of just writing the sheet music and how to take the MIDI from the sheet music and turn it into something that sounds good and doesn't just sound like chips and chirps like a lot of my music has for the last, yeah, decade and a half of me writing music. Um, and so, I've learned about panning and I've learned a little bit about sound sphere placement, but up and down makes no sense. I have no idea how producers end up achieving that. It is something that is beyond my understanding, and it's boggles my mind every time I hear it. But I love when I do, and it's probably a little bit of that mystery. A lot of music I get, even if I don't necessarily know how to put it into words. I understand what it's attempting to achieve, and I have a semblance of an idea of how it achieved that. And some of the production stuff, such as this, just goes right over my head, and it's got the magic to it that I haven't seen behind the curtain yet. So that might be why I'm drawn to it, but I have to point it out when I hear it, just because it is kind of phenomenal. It kind of blows my mind. So yeah, just like the general mixing, right? The levels of all the instruments, the clarity of it all, the placement of it all. It's all just done so well, and the song feels very full and animated because of it. It sounds like I am right there listening to the music, and I had to dedicate an entire section just to the production because of that. I don't think that that's a quality you always want, especially with some metal genres. You want it to be dirty, you want it to be gritty, and sometimes you want it to be compressed and feel like it's all right next to the listener rather than, large and looming or large and expansive. It all really depends on what type of music and what kind of emotion you're wanting to engage with. But we listen to a lot of metal on this channel. A lot of metal tends to be a little bit more centered, and it's always refreshing to listen to pop or electronic music where the producer is going to take a lot of make a lot of use out of the sound sphere to actually put instrumentation or instruments throughout rather than keep it all centered. And it's just really refreshing to hear stuff like that. And this is a really good example of that. So moving into the second section, though, once again we start to build. We start small. This time we start with just the vocals and a piano. I think that's it right here at the beginning is piano and vocals, and we slowly build from here. What's interesting though is we've shifted away from the quarter note and eighth note style, emphasizing mostly every other beat. What we had going in the first section, I didn't comment on this because I didn't think it was too important, but now that I'm realizing I'm going to contrast this specific point, I should have mentioned it. The opening section, we had a bass kick on 1 and a snare on 2, bass kick on 3 and a snare on 4, and that was pretty much our rhythmic idea throughout the entire first section. There were a couple other moments, or a couple other instruments that emphasized more than that, such as the panning eighth notes in the synthesizer. I don't remember what beats exactly they were emphasizing, but we were getting hits on the off beats, which was not something we saw a lot. It was more regulated to just a couple of instruments. But here, we've shifted that. We've retained the eighth note hits, but we've shifted it away from emphasizing 2 and 4 to emphasizing pockets of 3. There is one variation on this, but for the most part, we are looking at a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. So we have, if we're doing in groups of 3, but we have 8 beats per bar, well, 8 half beats per bar. We can't divide that out properly. There's going to be 2 left over. So we end up with this 3, 3, 2 concept, and the 2 feels like it's rushed. We get right back to the other one a half of a beat early. We repeat the phrase a half of a beat early. So it has this element of rushing at the end as we repeat the phrase a half of a beat earlier than we would expect if we continued on with this 3-hit pulse. So we have this element of rushing that kind of underlines everything. Every instrument ends up joining in on this in one fashion or another up until the end, and we have one instrument that's playing around with constant threes. Instead of looking at a one bar phrase, it expands the phrase out a little bit and allows it to keep this three beat concept going for a little bit before it has to um, make the shift so that it can line back up and start the phrase again on a downbeat. But we get to hear this three beat pulse for a few bars rather than just uh, just three beats. Um, where was I going with that though? So yeah, we have this three beat phrase. Oh, and then the different layers are coming in on top of this, right? So we start off with the vocals and the piano, and we start adding in different instruments. But a lot of them are kind of chiming in with this pulse. It is a stark contrast to where we just came from, where every instrument was kind of doing its own thing and creating this vast sound sphere, this massive atmosphere full of individual elements, whereas here we're getting individual timbres that are all kind of lining up rhythmically. And like I said, it's an interesting contrast to where we came from. Now, additionally, this section also has a volume dynamic. In fact, it kind of plays around with a lot of dynamics, where previously our only dynamic was layers, and as such, overlapping elements, where instruments would fill in the blanks of other instruments' lines. Here, though, all the instruments kind of come together to increase the intensity of it, and eventually the drums come in, and we get a little bit more of a bouncy, um, upbeat kind of rhythm rather than that backbeat emphasis we had on 2 and 4. We're kind of got something a bit more jumpy, bouncy, energetic. And around the time that the drums start to come in, the vocals also begin to change up their melodic flow, contrasting sort of in the first section, they have the vocals tend to be a little bit more lyrical. It's about holding out notes and just kind of having nice lines, and not really moving around too much rhythmically or being too rhythmically interesting. Whereas here, the rhythm begins to get a bit bouncy. We hear some staccato notes being introduced to the vocal line. And a lot of that is paired with the rising intensity in the musicality, as well as the rhythmic bounciness and overall just fun vibes coming from the drums that are no longer emphasizing the backbeat, 2 and 4, but emphasizing every beat with a little bit of a rhythmic urgency to it. And we have this building up of ideas, the layers, the intensity, everything kind of comes up, and we transition that into the guitar solo, I think it was. There might have been something intermediate there, but then we go into the guitar solo, and I love this guitar solo. There's some really interesting things going on here. When I was listening to it, I mentioned that there was the piano on the left was continuing the three pulse idea. I think this was the moment where it expanded out to multiple bar phrasing so it could keep the three pulse going for longer than every two repetitions. Like the earlier was 3-3-2, 3-3-2, where it had to convert to the 2 on every third repetition. This allowed it to keep the 3 for a longer period before having to do an abnomaly to line back up with the downbeat. But right pan, we had the guitar that was doing the solo, and something I absolutely love about this is just the melodic story writing. Every idea that comes out of the guitar is based off of or can be traced back to an idea that came before it. We had, um, the ideas flow, is what I'm saying, from one idea to the next, to the next, to the next. And you can draw a lineage back to the beginning of the guitar solo and not really find any moments where there's abrupt changes of ideas. Everything has this really nice movement into and out of ideas, and it creates this flowing idea, sort of like a story. I talk about musical storytelling, but I think this is a good time or a good way to talk about it this way. We have a series of sentences, and the sentences tend to flow into each other and out of each other, and by the end of a paragraph, you understand the story that was told. Each sentence was building upon ideas that was presented earlier. It wasn't a series of sentences that felt like they had no meaning or purpose to the ones around them. And that's what, to me, strong melodic storytelling is like. It's when every musical idea or phrase has some sort of tie back to ideas that were previously stated. There's a nice flow of ideas in a way that after you've heard the whole thing, you say, hey, that sounded really nice together. It all kind of fit together into a larger idea made up of smaller ideas that worked well within the context of those around them. And that's what happened here. Interestingly, after we hit the end of this guitar solo, we repeated it with the piano, I think it was, or maybe a synth, I don't remember, harmonizing the part with the guitar. We basically repeated the entire solo section again, and we also saw some minor variation in some of the ornamental and atmospheric concepts as well. And all of this built up into what would eventually see us return to more lyrical work that finishes out the song. Interestingly, the end of the song kind of just ends abruptly into this weird, distorted speech. And I'm not quite sure how to interpret that ending. And it even had some like white noise, I think it was, that just kind of cuts off sharply, if I remember correctly. It's just a really odd ending for everything that came before it that was beautifully crafted and constructed to move from the beginning of the song to the next 7.5 minutes of it to craft something that's just very consonant and hopeful and joyful and positive and energetic and warm. And then we just get this really odd final 5 seconds or so. I'm really confused about that one. So to me, though, the whole song, it feels, it feels very warm. The emotions that I talked about in the first section of the track are very much the same as the emotions I feel in the second, just with more energy, more momentum, more drive, whereas the first half is more, not lethargic, but laid back, chill, just kind of inviting, right? You're not here to take somebody on a journey, you're here to sit in front of them and have a nice conversation. There's not a lot of urgency or forward movement. It's just about inviting, hey, would you like to have a chat? And then you have said chat. Whereas the second half is more about, hey, you want to go on an adventure? And you go on an adventure. It's still uplifting, it's still positive, but there's a bounciness to it, a fun aspect. It's not just chill and colloquial, it's more energetic and driving. But the overall positivity of everything is still found in both sections. And I absolutely love just sitting in all of the harmonies that they craft throughout here. The harmonies, the wide soundscapes, the excellent use of soundscape and placing instruments in a variety of places that allow them to be heard, but also to blend in into the larger ideas. It is just at least to me, a very comforting thing to listen to. Unfortunately, like I mentioned earlier, I could not find lyrics to this. I would love to dive into them. If anybody can hit me up with a link to them, or even just a text document you wrote, maybe you transcribed the lyrics, you went back and listened to it and did that. Hit me up with it. I would gladly make an addendum to this video, another 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes of listening, looking at the lyrics and applying them to what I've spoken about the music here. But I think right here we're going to have to end the video just because I don't have said lyrics at this moment in time. So, with that said, those are my thoughts on Sordal's Lucifer. Beautiful work of art, really loved it, but let me know what you thought. Do you agree with what I said? Do you disagree? Was there anything I said that you think needs to be expanded upon? Go ahead and put those comments down in the comment section. Above that, if you could, go to the description box and find the link for Linktree. And there is a link for this menu right here. You can find everything related to the channel. You can pick up some merch. You can follow me on Twitter. You can join the Discord. You can join the Patreon. There's just a bunch of stuff in there. Go ahead and check it out. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. All right, that wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow with another sludge track and another special selection. Until next time, remember to be critical but not cynical of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.